Back with Cheryl, Jeff, and Darren. Before we get to the nuts and bolts of the most anticipated rematch since the 2010 Olympics, you kind of predicted that there was going to be the mess that there was at the beginning of the game the other night. You said there was going to be a line brawl. Not quite, but close to that with 3 fights in 9 seconds. There's no chance that's going to happen in the final, is there?
I really don't, but if they throw out the Tkachuks to start the game, all bets are off, James, and anything could happen. You would have to think that they got that out of their system, and neither team wants to risk taking a penalty to start the hockey game. This happened. I'm sure they all enjoyed it. They got it done. But this is just going to revert back to a tight Game 7 type of situation where it's very physical. There's little space on the ice, James. And it seems like for these games, with all the skill out there and all the guys winning scoring titles and scoring goals, we're going to be talking about a 2-1 or a 3-2 hockey game. And it seems like there's a recipe for that. Whatever team could have their star player step up and score, have a depth guy step up and contribute somehow, and then you factor in the special teams, either killing off a 5-on-3 or scoring a big power play goal, and then the goaltending obviously factors in as well.
You know, there are lots of reasons to predict that this could be one for the ages, right? I mean, it just sets up that way in the rematch based on what we all experienced on Saturday night. The Americans set the tone in terms of the nastiness of that game, but they didn't let up when they put the gloves back on. There was still a high level of physicality in this one. Doesn't matter if it's Sidney Crosby, if it's Connor McDavid, Team USA targeted top players. I mean, when do you see McDavid drilled like this by Charlie McAvoy? I mean, they isolated the Canadian Stars. And sure, you had some gamesmanship at the end of the period. Matthew Tkachuk, the shenanigans that goes along with the Tkachuk brothers. But I think when all is said and done on Thursday, what matters most is that championship, and they'll play the game well.
We'll get to the USAD in a second. It was outstanding against the Canadians. But up front, who frightens you for the Americans against Canada?
Well, there was 2 guys that I really thought played well, and they contributed to all 3 goals in that 3-1 victory, and that's Guentzel and Larkin. And there wasn't a lot of high-danger chances on both sides because of the defensive play and structure. So it was really difficult to get to the middle of the ice. But these 2 guys found a way. Guentzel, listen, you know he's a playoff performer. He knows how to rise to the occasion of the big game. He's attacking Reinhart there. It's not a goal Binnington wants to give up, but he knows who he's up against. And again, you see Larkin with speed, with pace. He's a lefty coming in on the right side, takes the shot, and then again, for the empty net, you're going to get Guentzel with his second of the game. So look at those 2 guys. Tight game, you know, space closes up. Right. These 2 guys will fight for those spots. And I think with Larkin's pace of play, and then, of course, Guentzel getting to those spots in and around the net front, you know, he's a big game player, and he can put the puck in the net.
You just showed those odd man rushes. There wasn't a lot for Canada in this game, James. Other than McDavid play, you watch that, and you're like, oh, maybe this is going to be one of those games. It did not happen for Canada. They have to find a way to generate offense. Against the Finns, they had some plays. Sidney Crosby forechecking. The second effort just pokes it there and gets it back. And look where McKinnon is. He's in the inside of the ice. Against the U.S., these plays weren't available. I also like this play up top. Look where that player is right there, Marchand, right at the top of the slot and to the inside. Sorelli here just takes it right to the net. USA did an unbelievable job of shutting down the middle of the ice through the neutral zone and in zone. They got to find a way to get in there.
The USD was terrific. Jacob Slaven may have been the MVP of that hockey game, didn't you think?
He was exceptional. And as a former D, you look at that, right? And I was watching him on puck, off puck. And keep in mind, he has not been on for a goal against. But let's just have a little gander at who he's been playing up against, right? McKinnon, Crosby, the hit, the physicality on Bennett right there. Just his presence known in the neutral zone, his spacing. I mean, that's against Crosby, you know, Captain Canada. Look at the activation of his stick, pushing to the outside. And then the awareness of how to come back with that stick to the middle of the ice. I just thought he was so effective, guys, at pushing to the outside, knowing where everyone was on the ice at all times. I mean, he played over 25 minutes, right? But he was also on for all 3 goals for. Yeah. So he's not flashy, but, man, does he ever get the job done. He was outstanding.
So the U.S. was a little better in that game Saturday night. But then Canada gets Cale Makar back for this game, which maybe equalizes things, maybe gives Canada a slight advantage with skaters. But is the biggest advantage for the Americans the one we've been talking about basically for the last 3 years, is that their goaltender is better than any of the Canadian goaltenders.
Yeah, I mean, that's a key storyline going into the championship game. There's no question about that. And if you look back at the play of Jordan Binnington against the Finns, he was excellent for the most part in that game. It got hairy late in the third period. But first two games, the issue with Binnington, of course, is the fact that he gave up a few sketchy goals. You can't afford this against Team USA in the championship game. So he knows that he's got to play his best, but John Cooper says he's got that fire in the belly. And there are the critics of Connor Hellebuyck who will also say, look, this guy, despite the fact that he'll win the Vezina again, they're not convinced that he's a big game or a big series netminder. I would argue with that, but it does feel like he's got to have a special performance as well.
A lot of pressure on the goaltenders.
Yep.
The coaches, all the players have talked about the margins being razor thin. So if you give up that goal in this hockey game, whichever one of these...
Can't have it.
You can't have it because it's going to cost you the tournament.
Yeah, and the timing of those saves, right, is critical. You know, especially you're coming off, your team scores, you got to make sure you're making that next save. It's absolutely huge.
Every time we do a World Juniors, what does Bobby Mack say? When there's two really good teams and they play in the round robin and they meet again, it's really hard for one team to beat the other twice. Canada hopes that holds true. They haven't lost to the Americans in a best-on-best final since way back at the '96 World Cup.